Morning, everybody. Happy Monday and welcome to Learning at Work Week. I'm super excited to get it kicked off this morning with what are the skills required for future HR heroes. We're going to start in 2 minutes past 9. I always start a couple of minutes after 9 just to get sure that everyone can get in. Don't know whether you're kind of dropping the kids or you're kind of getting a late breakfast. Or just kind of coming off a million calls if you're kind of working in Asia. So we're going to give it about another 3 minutes. So if you do need to do anything, please don't worry, go and do it. You won't miss anything. We're recording this, so if you do get an unexpected call and you have to kind of drop off, don't worry, we will be sending a recording. So you don't need to scribble like mad, you will get this recording and any offers that we have at the end. But super excited to talk to you on this Monday morning. And if everybody that's joining us could just put into the chat your name, the organisation that you work for and the job role that you have. It's always great to see all the people that join us. It gives me an idea of the types of roles, the type of organisations that you work for, and I can hopefully tailor some of the content to some of the needs that you have. So super excited to be talking to you. Thanks so much for joining us. Hi Nikki, hi Elisa, hi Amy, Lucy, Adrian, Martha, brilliant. So great to see all of you, and thank you so much for joining. I hope you get a lot out of this this morning, and it's the start of many webinars that you might be joining us on this week as part of Learning at Work Week at LTT. Hi Catherine. Catherine's a member, a senior consultant in LTT. Fantastic. I know I can't see you, but I'll be seeing you later. Thank you so much for joining. It really means a lot. And I've got Charlie as my right hand today, moderating. So you might see Charlie sort of answering questions as we go along, but also kind of prompting me to do things if I get a bit lost in the conversation that we're having. So it'll be great if you want to chat with each other, but also if you want to ask me questions, don't feel you need to wait to the end. You can just put it into the chat and I'll make sure that I get to them. So thank you so much. It's brilliant to see so many people here and of so many different organizations and roles. So I'm really hoping that this supports you and your development. We're going to start in about 30 seconds. I'm very excited. I just got back from holiday, so I've kind of got probably more energy than I normally would on a Monday morning. So I'm in the swing of it. I haven't got that I haven't come back with a thud quite yet. That might be by the end of the week, but I don't think so because we're going to be doing a lot of really fun stuff together over the next week. So super cool. Brilliant. Hi, Nikki. No, I can't see you, but again, another member of my team. So thank you so much for joining and look forward to seeing you later on our team call. Brilliant. Fabulous. Okay. So I said I'd start at 2 minutes past 9 and I will. So good morning, everybody. For those that don't know me, I'm Jo Taylor. I'm MD and founder of Let's Talk Talent. And I'm really thrilled that we're starting Learning at Work Week today with what are the skills required for future HR superheroes. Our premise at Let's Talk Talent is really to help you get, keep and grow brilliant people. But one of our core values is kind people are kind of people. And this is what Learning at Work Week is all about. We want to give back to the HR community of which we enjoy and love working with. And this week is dedicated ultimately to you. The theme this year for us is all about personal effectiveness. So over the next week, members of my team, so Catherine, Nick, and Claire, and myself are going to be running a webinar a day and helping you support your journey as HR superheroes. And what better way to start by kind of kicking off with this webinar. It's part of who we are and it's the second year that we've done it. So if you haven't signed up, and I'll tell you at the end, there are other webinars this week. But what's really important is that sometimes as HR superheroes, we don't take the time to develop ourselves. And this week is all about you, fundamentally. Yes, there are skills in here. Yes, there are activities. Yes, there are things that you can take back into your organization. But we really wanted to dedicate this week to you. So that's what this is all about. And what better way than really thinking about the skills, the training, the attributes, the relationships that are going to be really critical to keep you at that top table. So let's get going. What we're going to cover today is we're going to look at the context. So we all know the sort of pre-COVID, post-COVID context, but we have really as a community and a community of practice ultimately propelled ourselves at the top table. If you were there before, fantastic. But we really saw HR come into its own. Now, a lot of you will be sitting here and thinking, yeah, that's okay, but how do we stay there? How do we kind of keep that longevity? And we're going to be talking about that. But also, some of you will be sitting on here and thinking, I'm absolutely exhausted. The last couple of years have really taken it out of me. Well, let's think about some of those skills and those training and those attributes that will really help you supercharge and maybe take a step back. So this week, we've got a brilliant webinar on mindfulness, for example. Take some time. This is what this week is all about. So let's think about the context. I've mentioned it a couple of times, STAR model, skills, training, attributes, relationships. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to enable you to think about what we believe that model looks like, but also give you the opportunity to create your own model by giving you a free template as well. You may not agree with everything that we've put on this webinar today. So you're going to get that blank template so you can have a go and take that back into your organization. And then we've got some offers for you. So you know, if you've been on any of our webinars before, that we like to give away some free templates, tools. So you'll get an opportunity, if you stay with me for the next 45, 50 minutes, some offers for you at the end. Sound like a plan? I can see loads of people coming in and saying hello. So hello to those people that I haven't spoken to. So really looking forward to talking to you. So that's the overview. That's the context for the next sort of 45 and 50 minutes. So let's start with this quote. And I love it. Now, politically, whether you like Barack Obama, it doesn't really matter, right? Ultimately, this is about change. And if I know what change feels like personally, I also know what it feels like professionally, having worked in multiple organizations and now running my own consultancy, change within a smaller business, but also having to support organizations going through big change. But as an HR community, I really think this says what it says on the tin. Basically, change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. And no truer word at the moment. There is huge amounts of disruption. Cost of living, the economy, food prices, fuel, wherever you are in the world, you cannot escape change. But we have an opportunity to make our mark. And that's what I want to do at Let's Talk Talent. I want to give you the power and the energy and the motivation to do that within your organizations. And if we wait for somebody to do it, then we're going to be waiting a long time. We have the opportunity to really change the fabric of work as it is now. There's never a better time to do that. And we can do that as HR superheroes. So let's think about what we need to do and how we need to do it and what support you might need to do that. So we are at the top table. We've probably never left it in some ways, whether we work to the CEO or we work to the CFO or Chief Operating Officer, we are at that top table. And with COVID and the pandemic, we've absolutely risen to be an integral part. To drive the business, you needed the people and the culture to go alongside it. And it couldn't be forgotten in a pandemic, because there was huge amounts of disruption, huge amounts of change. So we were invited, if we weren't already at that top table, into more businesses. And we've definitely seen that with the clients that we've worked to. But people have become, I think, as important as the bottom line. You know, the bottom line won't happen if you don't have the people, right? It's obvious. But what we've seen is that people now have much more choice. So whether you believe in the Great Resignation or the Great Attraction or war for talent, you know, depending on your view, people of getting, keeping and growing brilliant people within your organization has never become more important. And people have a choice. We've seen it when we've been recruiting. People have 2 or 3 or even more offers. It's a candidate-driven market. So how do you compete? How do you make sure that your EVP is really singing and really telling people what it means and why they should be working for you? But it's shifted from just getting great people or brilliant people ultimately to keeping and growing. And that's where, as HR, we're really moving and pivoting, I believe. It used to be just about attraction, but now with careers, succession, performance, all of those elements in keeping and growing, we really need to think about, you know, good strategies to enable that to happen. So how do you do that? How do you get, keep and grow brilliant people? So first and foremost, let's think about it we're going to think about it purely from an HR perspective. We're not going to talk about all the employee life cycle and all of those elements. We'll cover that in later webinars during this week and in other webinars that we do on white papers and everything. This is about you. So how do you get motivated, energized to get, keep and grow brilliant people? And how do you become that HR superhero? Now, first and foremost, let's not forget the hard skills. So a lot of you will have qualifications. So whether that's CIPD, you'll know TUPE, redundancy, data management, you'll have those hard skills, whether they're, you know, actual qualifications. I don't have any of those qualifications, but I know how they, you know, I know the principles, and I've run big HR teams. But at the end of the day, hard skills aren't enough, right? They are the, you know, the tangible qualifications, the tick box to a certain extent in terms of those hard skills. But I think becoming an HR superhero is about focusing on the H in HR, which is ultimately human. Let's put the human back into human resources, whether you call yourself people, culture, whatever role you have, putting that human into human resources. Gone are the days where I started probably 30 years ago reporting into a head of personnel. We've gone from all of that, right? The people are our biggest assets. So let's put the human, and let's think about the human skills that we want to be treated and respected and trusted with, and replicate that through the organization. So the human skills are your secret sauce. They're going to enable you to stay at that top table and create that simply irresistible experience for your people. So what are those human skills? And we're going to really cover that in this webinar. And the reason why we're going to cover that is that I think it's going to really focus on this persona map. And we've done this for a number of clients. I'm going to talk you through a case study later in this webinar of where we've used this and how we've used it. But thinking about the human skills, we break them down into actual skills. So that's the knowledge. That's the things that you can teach somebody. So that could be communication, could be negotiation, could be stakeholder management, for example, could be TUPE, for example. So but they're more human than qualifications, as I said. So those skills. Then you break it down into attributes. Now, whether you call it attributes or behaviors, these are things like empathy, collaboration, trust, for example. They're attributes. They then break down into training. So what are the formal or informal? They enhance those skills and those attributes. And then the relationships. So in any becoming an HR superhero is all about relationships. And when we talk about this in careers, we talk about this in terms of networks. So what's your current job network? What's your future job network? And what's your development network? Relationships are critical. And when I talk about relationships, I'm talking about networks internally, but also I'm talking about networks externally, like HR Ninjas, for example, which a lot of you will be members of, or a community like we're creating in terms of Let's Talk Talent through our mentor program or through these webinars. You are a community of practice listening to this webinar today. How are you connecting with each other during this webinar, but also afterwards as well? How are you creating that community of practice, that network? Relationships are critical in becoming that HR superhero, as are all of the other three, but relationships play a really strong part. So if that's the basis of becoming an HR superhero, using the STAR model, skills, training, attributes, and relationships, what areas do you think, if you think about it in terms of skills, attributes, training, relationships, that you need support in? So let's take a moment and pause. What areas do you think? Is it skills more? Is it attributes? Is it relationships? Is it training? Just if you feel comfortable, put something into the chat. It can be, very broad. It doesn't have to be specific, but it would be lovely to hear what you think you need support in, because it helps us think about how we can support you, but also how we can pass that information and create activities that are going to help you more tangibly. Brilliant. Thank you. Skill. Relationships is a new role. Brilliant, Nicola. Lovely. Skills and relationships. Skills, relationships. Brilliant. I love it, Samantha. That's really great. So you can double check that my common sense is that it's trusting your gut, right? If you trust your gut, but sometimes we get with work, it feels wrong to do that. Lovely. Relationships, a lot of networking. Yes, that's absolutely true, Liz. I think a lot of networks closed, didn't they? And also the networking online is not the same as being in a room with people, is it? So I totally get that. And relationships, as people have been saying, are not only internal, but they're also external. We did a round table, so if any of you want to kind of read that blog recently, and that was the first opportunity that we got people together, and everybody said, God, it's so nice to see people. It wasn't going to be a massive event. I don't think anyone wants to go to those massive events anymore. So, but what was really nice is that the hour and a half that we spent together, we kind of moved the group from here to there, and the trust and the energy in the room changed tangibly. Because to be honest with you, I can't see any of you. So I'm hoping that I'm landing this really well, and the fact that you're chatting and you're feeding back to me gives me the impression that it's landing. But there's nothing better than picking up those cues and clues, right? When you're in the room and having an opportunity. And networking doesn't have to be like the old 80s sort of car salesman or salesperson anymore. It's much more about deepening that connection. And even if you go into a room and you pick up one business card or you have one great conversation, that's how I used to test myself. Because being an extrovert, you'd think that networking would be great. I still find it really difficult. I like to have one-on-one conversations rather than have loads. So really great to understand where you're coming from in terms of relationships, and it's something that we will pick up and hopefully help you and support you with going forward. And thank you, Charlie, for putting the blog post in. If anyone wants to kind of read it, hopefully it will help you. Brilliant. So thank you so much for sharing. That was super useful. So we're going to go into this in a little bit more detail now. And this is our HR superhero star map. So I may have missed things, and I'm very happy to be challenged. So challenge your way. But this is what we believe through talking to HR leaders such as yourselves, and from our work and from our experience of working in businesses, that these are the skills, training, attributes, and relationships that you need to be a superhero. Now, don't start like I would do, start ticking off and going, I've got that, I haven't got that, how do I get that? We'll come to some of those things, and I'm going to take you through some of them in a little bit more detail. And I'm happy, I'm going to offer people an opportunity to have a conversation. No sales at the end of this, if you want to, and we can talk about you in more detail in that. But it isn't about ticking off and saying I've got everything, so I'm a superhero. It's all about learning. It's about that growth mindset, fundamentally. So there's things on here that I think sometimes I'm really brave, and other times I'm not. It's kind of understanding what motivates, what energizes, what our strengths are, what our drivers are. So we believe that that we could go on forever in terms of skills, but these are the three critical skills: decision making, resilience, and empathy. Some people might call it compassion, empathy for us. Attributes, being brave, being bold, being challenging, being trusted fundamentally, but also driving that inclusive, making sure that everyone feels as if they can belong. Training, that network piece, being a connector. I love that. We talk about that in our the 4 C's of networking, or networks, in one of our HR sprint, in our career sprint, being that connector. So how do you connect people, as well as how do you get connected? But how do you coach? How are you curious? That growth mindset again, and being that strategic business leader. And then the relationships will be from top down to bottom up, and also broad, from your peers to your CEO, CFO, C-suite, ultimately, managers, your people, department heads, but also relationships externally. So these are what we believe is the star bat for becoming an HR superhero. So let's go into this in a little bit more detail. I'm going to break some of these down for you. And please, if you've got any questions or you disagree, let me know. So let's start with skills, right? So the two that we pulled out are decision making and resilience. So what do we mean by decision making and resilience? Well, decision making is about being decisive, and not being afraid to take a decision, even if you don't have all of the data. When we think about high potential and the highest potential individuals, they have that learning agility. They do make decisions with limited data sometimes, but they're not afraid to fail fast and iterate. I always think decision making is about having everything in beta, really just testing and seeing. And for me, that's the philosophy that I've taken into my own business. I'm not afraid to try some things. Yeah, I don't want it to cost and it's your own money, you don't want it to cost a lot of money. And when it's your business's money, you kind of want to make sure that you're getting value and that return on investment, because you'll be asking for that. But I'm not afraid to test. And we learn by doing those things. We learn from testing, from things not necessarily going well, from really taking an opportunity to take a little bit of a risk in a safe environment where you have the backing of your CEO or CFO or your team. Resilience. Now, resilience, can feel sometimes like a bit of a, buzzword bingo in terms of, am I being resilient today? Am I not? I've heard so many people getting feedback about, wanting to be more resilient. And one of the webinars we're talking about in terms of, with Catherine, is around time management, but also, with Nick, we're talking about sort of mindfulness is a part of, resilience, but ultimately it's about motivation and energy. And not only understanding what motivates and energizes us. So, for example, it's unlikely that I would do a webinar in the end of the day, because I'm much more of a morning person and I get my energy in the morning. But by probably 3 or 4, it's probably not the best time to get me in terms of making decisions, for example. It's not because my resilience is low, but because I've had a big, portion of my day. And therefore, what motivates and energizes me is much more about creation. And that's where I do that in the morning. So kind of understanding your natural rhythm and energy is really important. And we're going to really cover that in some of the webinars this week. But I've got more information if anyone would like it. So when we think about resilience, when we look at that in a little bit more detail, the actual definition of resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. And while we believe it's an overused word, it's really important that we feel like we have that elasticity. So we all have been through difficult periods of our life, but it's how you bounce back. And that's where, we find the most out about ourselves, is where something doesn't go right, and we're able to kind of bounce back and learn from that and use it as an opportunity to improve ultimately. But with resilience, we tend to look at it as we've got to bounce back. There's things that we haven't done right. There's, failure. It can feel quite negative. You can kind of get into a bit of a negative loop. But what I think is important is around taking time to celebrate the successes. And that's what resilience for me is all about. It's taking time to celebrate the small things and give yourself those rewards along the way, so that you're constantly, reinforcing some of those good habits and those things that give you that motivation and that energy. Because for me, the most powerful statement that I heard a couple of years ago is that it's about progress, not perfection. And sometimes when we're an HR superhero, we think that we have to be perfect, and there is no perfection. Unfortunately, there's no perfection in life. Life is like that. It's learning to ride the waves, ultimately. And there's a really cool tool that looks at our saboteurs. And we used it actually in that session that we did as a round table. When we're thinking about tapping in and moving from our inner critic, which is, to our inner mentor, which is all about resilience and bouncing back. And one of the saboteurs is around, it's high standards or high performance or high perfection. And that's all about perfectionism and not being happy with what we have. And sometimes it's about living in the moment and realizing that we sometimes don't have that energy. We don't have anything else to give. But make sure that you're surrounding yourself. That's where relationships come into play, that enable you to bounce back, but also enable you to put the mirror up and celebrate some of the things that you're doing brilliantly, because all of you will be doing brilliantly. So think about it in that context when you're thinking about resilience. With me so far? Anything anyone would like to add and that you think I might have forgotten about resilience that you've learned that you think would be good to share with the group? Okay, so let's move on to training. So we've done skills, now we're looking at training. And the two that we pulled out here are coach and connector. So some of you will be coaches on this call today. I'm not necessarily talking about a formal coaching qualification, but I'm thinking that coaching is about providing that space and time to support others to realize their potential. I fundamentally believe that everyone has potential. Everyone is talented on this call. Everybody is talented within organizations. The question that we don't ask ourselves is that potential for what? Where can your talent take you? Where are the possibilities? And using coaching questions and using coaching techniques creates that safe environment where someone can go to you for advice, that you show that you care and that you're taking that opportunity to listen while still holding that person accountable. It's not about you basically doing everything. So I think that's really important when we're thinking about coach and coaching. The second is around connector. So, you know, whether you're going into the office regularly or you're creating virtual events, it's really important to feel as if we're connected to something and connected to people. And we've lost those water cooler moments. And purpose of any organization is driven by that sense of connection, that sense of coming together and being able to talk and work and feel the other people's energy. So I think it's really important to think about what connections you need, whether that's in relationships or what connections you need in your work to give you that opportunity. And connector is about, for me, excuse me, being like a conductor in an orchestra. You know, as an HR leader, it's not about telling the first violins how to play or, you know, going in to the auditorium and playing the flute. You want everyone to play together. And that's what a connector does. It enables people to play together. But you're trusted to hold the mirror up to the organization. That's, you know, people will know that you're going to tell them the truth, however hard it is. And that's one of our values, is to do that. But that's what I would empower you to do as well, while remaining that impartial and fair. Now, we get party to huge amounts of sometimes quite distressing and confidential information, but it's our opportunity to really hold the mirror up and say it like it is sometimes. But we as HR create the join up for the whole employee experience. So we enable, alongside the CEO, the SLT, everybody in the organization, managers, to make it a great place to work ultimately. It's not just up to us. A connector doesn't do it. If you're just going to be the first violin, then you're not a connector. What's important is that you enable and you empower and you trust your team, but you also trust the organization, because culture is held by everyone in their hand, not just you as an HR leader. So that's connector. As we move through into attributes, the two that we pulled out here are about being brave and being bold. So being brave is not having all the answers all the time. It's sometimes asking for help. And I've done that multiple times. I've got a number of mentors that I ask for help. You can't know all the answers, and you sometimes don't even have time to reflect. So whether you need that support internally and externally, it's a really good attribute to have about being brave, because you're representing the whole employee population ultimately. So sometimes you are going to have to be brave and say it like it is. But also saying, I don't know, and finding the connections and the networks that will help you get to that answer. Don't be afraid. You know, bold is the second piece here. You know, innovation, that beta piece that I talked about before. You know, we all make mistakes. It's okay to say we got it wrong. It wasn't the best way we could have done it. You know, remember what I said at the beginning, change is constant. So don't be afraid to try new things. And for me, in any job, you should sort of have a 70-30 sort of elasticity. 70% that you know and that you can do standing on your head and that you can activate through your team. But that 30% stretch is really important. A little stretch never hurt anybody, but if you don't have enough stretch, then it's chance to think about whether you're in the right organization or even in the right role sometimes. Think about where you're getting that stretch from, because that's about being bold and looking at yourself and thinking about, if I don't get it, if I can't get it in that organization, where can I get it from ultimately? So brave is about taking those considered risks. It's being brave to speak out when things are wrong and making change that has lasting effect. Thinking about what's the right thing to do, even if it's an unpopular thing. What are you doing and enabling that to happen, even when sometimes you're not even sure you're sure that you've got the backing. But being brave is about being visible. And I don't mean physically visible, but, you know, being visible in good times and in bad. And that's what great HR superheroes and great leaders do. They don't shy away from the difficult times, and they're very visible. They communicate in good times and in bad, and actually are there probably more visibly when things are going wrong than perhaps when things are going right. So think about that when you're thinking about your bravery. And finally, let's look at relationships. So a lot of you will be strategic business leaders. It's about understanding the commercial reality. So joining up the business and the people agenda together and finding new ways to create, develop, and keep your talent, keep and grow brilliant people. Because that enables you to be seen by the leadership team as a peer, and that you're adding value to the business rather than just the area of expertise that you have. And then being inclusive, whether you think about it in terms of ED&I, whether you believe it's belonging, it's about creating environments where people can be themselves, and that you're being truly representative, both internally and externally, of the customers and the people that you serve. So whether you separate ED&I into a separate area, or you include it across everything that you do in the employee value proposition, that sense of belonging and inclusivity is ultra important in HR today. So when we think about this in a little bit more detail about how do you become a strategic business leader, it's about moving away, if you can. Some of you will be single entities within your business because you'll be working in smaller organizations. So how do you become less operational? How do you stop getting all of the talent acquisition, doing all the recruitment, doing all of the contracting? And how are you adding value to the business? How are you enabling some of those things to happen? Now, if you're at the top table, great. But if you're not, why not? What is holding you back? Who's the blocker? How do you kind of bring them with you on the journey? Aligning both your external message, your customer proposition, with your employee proposition, making sure that there's congruence between the two, so that when people are being recruited or people are figuring out whether they want to work for you, whether they see themselves being part of your journey, and having that HR strategy. We say that HR strategy is no more than a plan on a page, ultimately. So thinking about what your plan on the page is and delivering on it. So that's going into a little bit more detail of the skills, the training, the attributes, and the relationships that we believe make you a future HR superhero. And a lot of you will already be HR superheroes. It's just about enhancing that and giving yourself permission, ultimately. Any questions so far? Please don't be afraid to ask any questions. Happy to answer them now, but I'm also happy to wait till the end if that's more useful. Okay. So there's no questions, then we're going to give you a blank model for you to use. So you can see at the side here, you can download it, and I can see there's lots of people clicking. This gives you an opportunity to not only, when you get the recording, to think about what we believe are the skills, training, attributes, and relationships, but also to think about it in the context of your business and create your own star map for your own HR function. So feel free to download it and really have a go at building your own, because yours may feel very different to ours, or there may be kind of synergy between the two. So I just wanted to, before we kind of wrap up, I wanted to give you an idea of how we might, put some of this into practice, and give you an opportunity to have a look at a case study, a team that we worked with and we've been working with on and off for the last 3 years. And we worked directly to their chief people officer when he sort of had been in the business only about 6 months at the time. And the key question, or the exam question, that he wanted to ask himself after sort of being in the business 6 months and having, listening, doing a lot of listening groups and thinking about what he wanted his people function to focus on, was that he wanted to shift the focus from operational HR to become a more customer-centric HR function. He believed that was key to them being successful and them being at the top table. And he deliberately picked customer because he wanted it to relate to his external customer, which were universities, for example, and higher education, and make sure that people understood his external. And Zoe, you were part of that original Jisc team. So thank you for sharing that. It was great to see you on this. So you can pick me up if I miss anything or I get it wrong. So that was the exam question. So what we did was we interviewed the leadership team. So the leadership team, so the CEO at the time and all of the sort of heads of departments. We asked all of the team to complete a work diary. So really thinking about what was your role, what were you doing, how were you interacting with people. It was incredibly enlightening seeing what people were doing on a day-to-day basis, so we could understand how much time people were spending on, doing the doing, sort of operational, and how much they were collaborating, for example, or how much people were thinking about strategy, relationships, etc. We defined with the team who the customers were, so we did use a tool, a persona map, which I'll give you a site of in a minute, to define who the customers were within Jisc. And they were really varied. Even when you looked at managers, you were breaking them down into sort of new managers, experienced, senior managers. So we were kind of really breaking it down to that detail. We looked at the RACI of the priorities. So I don't know if Zoe will agree. I think there are about 70 priorities. It may be slightly less, but there were quite a lot of priorities. Thank you. Great for the thumbs up. And so how on earth can an HR team really focus on all of those priorities and do them really well? So we really wanted to think, if you wanted to be customer centric, how do you do less better fundamentally? And then we helped the team come up with basically their mission, their value statement. So that, in a way, started to get people to start really think about that customer centricity, both from sort of top down, bottom up, but fundamentally take yourself out of your role and put yourselves in the shoes of the customer, fundamentally. And this is just an overview of the process. So Claire and myself looked at this through 3 lenses. We looked at it from an individual perspective, and all sprint 1 was all around thinking about job descriptions, the daily journal, the STAR model, and we did some analysis. So that was at the individual. We looked at it from a team perspective, where we used the RACI. We presented some of the findings that we'd seen. We looked at persona maps. We looked at gap analysis, and we looked at sort of redefining and moving roles together, and where they pivoted and where they sort of, who was responsible for it, who was leading for it, who was actually delivering it ultimately. And then we looked at it from an organization perspective. So we looked at this from a journey map. So if you looked at the first 100 days of somebody coming into Jisc, for example, the sort of comms, and then how we would feedback. So Gemma, what kind of things did we ask people to record in the work diaries? Well, in the work diaries, it was everything from what did you do that day, to be honest with you. So it could be as much granular detail as you want. So I had 5 meetings today, for example. 3 of them were about recruitment, 2 of them were with L&D, 1 of them was with my line manager. And we got people to sort of then break down the sort of topics that they were doing. So we could really see how much was being spent on sort of doing the doing of the role. So if you were in talent acquisition, for example, how much time were you spending talking to candidates versus thinking about strategic workforce planning, for example. So it was very much a balance between the sort of operational and some of the deeper pieces. And it gave us a huge amounts of data to look at and feedback, and we fed it back through different themes. So what were we seeing? So some of the things that we saw were that a lot of people were staying in their lane, and that there was kind of clear demarcation. Or actually, how do you kind of get, say, talent acquisition to be starting to talk to development? How are the business partners playing a part in thinking about what future workforce planning was needed, for example? So we were kind of looking for those types of things. Hopefully that answers your question. So that was the overview of the process, and you don't have to follow, this was defined specifically for Jisc. There were lots of different ways. What are the RACI priorities? Well, the RACI was very much based on the priorities that the HR team had. So we were asking the team to break them down, and using RACI as a tool, think about the importance of them and the influences and all of those types of things. So I will come back to your question. I'm sure one of the team can answer what RACI stands for. I can do that in a second if no one comes back, but that would be great. Okay, so here are some of the tools. Thank you. Responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. Brilliant. Love it. Thank you. Here are some of the sprint tools that we use. So this is the daily journal. This was the star map. These were some of the persona maps, the RACI that we looked at, and the customer journey. So that just gives you an idea of some of the tools that we used. Brilliant. And if anybody wants to know more about RACI, we're really happy to talk to you about it in more detail. But Patrick and Charlie have given really good examples of the metrics. So they're the sprint tools. So when we think about the team's transformation, the team transformed in two ways. The first was around structural changes. So there were going to be some structural changes, and I'm not obviously going to go into huge amounts of detail about it, but there were, roles were aligned, roles were changed, people were brought in because there was identified gaps and opportunities. So there were, as a result of becoming more, going back to that exam question, there were some structural changes that happened. And in any sort of HR transformation, you'd expect there to be some sort of structural change. That was really interesting to see that come from everybody. People, it was a big ta-da moment for everybody. So it wasn't, about losing people or, kind of making people redundant in any way, but they, to become customer centric, there needed to be some realignment and also some acquisition of where skills and where particular areas were missing. So there were some structural changes, but also there were changes to reputation. So that was the way that the HR team were seen within the business really increased as a result of focusing on that particular exam question. So that could be seen through employee engagement, through some of the project work that we did with the business. So we did a big piece of work around career pathways, and actually the engagement from the team, the business team, really changed from because of the fact that the engagement from the HR team was much earlier. It was much more seen as a collaboration and a partnership than ever before. So definitely that team over that 2-3 years went through a massive transformation, and I would say that they're now at a point where they're kind of thinking about, okay, so where's the next level of success? Where is the next transformation, or where is the next pivot rather than transformation? And how do they get better going forward? So it was an amazing project and something really I'm excited to be part of, but it really shows how you can build those future HR superheroes yourself by thinking about it in that way. So hopefully that helps. So in summary, I've hopefully excited you that it's an exciting time to be an HR leader, but let's not forget, change does take time. So don't beat yourself up and think that you've got to kind of do this all the time. I think that's really important. If you're at the top table, it's now that what we do will define us. It's not what we did 2 or 3 years ago. It's thinking about the present and planning for the future. In terms of one of our values, the best is yet to come. For me, that means about living now, but planning for the future. Take time like you're doing today. Come on some of the other webinars if you want, download some of the white papers, think about using that blank star model to develop yourself. It's not just about what you give to the business, it's what you're giving back to yourself. seek support. You're doing that by coming on some of these webinars, but who can you connect with through this webinar as well afterwards? And let's all put the human back into HR. We owe it to ourselves, and we owe it to the people that we work with. I think that's really important. I can see there's a question before I go to some of the offers. Was every member of the HR involved in the work diary priorities of RACI? Yes, they were all completely involved. And I can't remember exactly how many people, but I'm pretty sure that the whole team was about 15 people. But it could have been more. But it definitely, everybody was involved. So it wasn't just the leadership team. So, and what happened, and as a result, I think that really helped bring people together. Haley, focusing on the strategic business leader aspect and delivering on strategy, what types of KPIs do you recommend do people use currently? Well, Haley, we've got a free, it's a mini white paper, which we can put into this. I'm sure Charlie will find it in a second. That's got KPIs in it, some sort of the soft and the hard ones. And we like to think about it in terms of outputs and outcomes. So outputs are the strong metrics. So for everything from sort of ED&I to succession to how many times, attraction, some of the really hard metrics. But then the outcomes are some of the softer things, like, are you having more talent conversations? Do people feel that they can be themselves within your organization? Are your managers having career conversations? Those types of things are really important to think about, both hard and soft metrics. In that sense, but we've got a free resource that would give you tons of, I think it's about 100 different metrics that you could have a look at, and again, we'll put that into the chat and give you sight of that as well. Brilliant. Okay, so in some of the things that we've got to give you, so I asked you to hold on for 50 minutes, and we're at the 50-minute mark. Here's a superheroes white paper. Think about how you can use your skills to be an HR superhero. So you can download your free guide to becoming a superhero, where what I've talked about today is in huge amount, well, not huge, but lots more detail. So please feel free to download that. It's completely free, and hopefully it will bring some of what I talked about to the fore. So that's your first free resource. The second is, if any of you are looking for coaching, or whether you want coaching for your team or in the organization, we have created a coach on demand service, which is incredibly flexible, accessible. It's all virtual, can be done face-to-face, but mainly virtual. And it's at a really low cost point. So it makes it really accessible and really cost effective for you. And we've been using this with both HR leaders, HR managers, but also a variety of businesses at multiple levels. So if you need some coaching for yourself, then it's a very low cost way of asking for support. So again, if you want more information about that, then please feel free to click, and we're happy to do that. Patrick, I can see you've got a question, and I will definitely come to that in a second. Let me just go through this, and I'll come back to your question. As I talked about, and I've been sort of teasing you throughout this webinar, we have a number of other webinars this week, and also a range of webinars throughout the remaining couple of months. So we've got Catherine's tomorrow around time management, the art of delegation. We've got Nick on mindfulness, can help with well-being, Claire around courageous mindset, and I'm finishing off the week with understanding self and others. So we're going to be talking more about understanding yourself and energy during that. So feel free to sign up. It's not too late to sign up to any of them this week. And then we've also got career planning and how to motivate teams, which Catherine's doing I believe in June. So if anybody wants to sign up to those, feel free to. They're completely free, and we love talking to you and love supporting you. We've also got a range of free white papers. So if any of you are thinking about your HR strategy, L&D, succession planning, performance management, etc., career planning, then we've got some white papers, so you can browse our range of resources. Again, they're completely free. Feel free to download them and use them, and do tell us what you think, because we're always keen to improve as we go. And as Charlie says, there's going to be an email this afternoon with all these links, so you don't need to worry if you haven't clicked on anything. You'll be able to do that at your leisure. And then finally, no direct selling. So this is about you. This is about me supporting you. So if you want a free 30-minute consultation with me, just to have a chat, or any support, you just want to pick my brain, we just want to say hello, whatever you want, then, you know, we're called Let's Talk Talent for a reason, because we like to chat. So if anyone would like to book some time with me directly, then feel free to, and I'll make sure, apologies if I haven't already done it, but I'll make sure that my link is up to date, so you've got my most up-to-date availability. But very happy to do that. So I'm just going to come back to Patrick's question, which was thinking about the STAR map. Resilience and self-care is important to success as an HR professional. It is, I think, important to have a supportive team network, as it can be difficult to deal with the challenges of HR on a daily basis. I think you're absolutely right, Patrick. I think that's really important, that while self-care is important, if you have a supportive team, both you know, your line manager, but the SLT, and also your team being supportive, then it enables you to feel more motivated, energized, and ultimately able to bounce back. So when you're having a bad day, being vulnerable, I think, is something that isn't in the STAR map. But vulnerability for me as a leader is a really important part and trait that I hold very dear. So when I've gone through difficult things, being able to have a supportive team and being able to feel vulnerable and not feel judged is part of my, I suppose, my wish list of growing and developing my team and my business ultimately. So I think you're spot on, and thank you so much for sharing. That's really brilliant. Any other questions before I let you go? 5 minutes to go, but I'm very happy to answer anything that you might have. Well, I hope you've really enjoyed it today. I've really enjoyed talking to you. It's been wonderful to kind of come back from holiday and kind of kick off with such a great session and great participation. I really enjoy doing these, but it's really lovely when we're able to give back to you and support you on your journey. So have a great Learning at Work week, whatever you're doing. If you've got activities in your business, good luck with getting them moving, and hopefully we'll see some of you on some of our webinars as we go through the week. But if not, have a fantastic week, whatever you're doing. And remember, you know, change that comes from all of us, and we're the people that are going to make that change. And I wish you huge success, and really looking forward to seeing your journeys. So thank you so much, and I will see you very soon. Have a great day.